Hi, I'm Roshan Roeder, Vice President and General Manager of the Airborne Multifunction Sensors Division for Northrop Grumman. I'm excited to welcome you to this month's Pro Webinar Series event. At Northrop Grumman, we are proud to work with organizations like SASE, who are great advocates for the Asian community. I'd like to thank each of you for being here today and for the hard work you're putting in today to build a stronger tomorrow. Before the webinar begins, I'd like to show you a brief film highlighting and recognizing members of our team. We are committed to creating a community where everyone is welcome and our differences are not only recognized, but celebrated. Thanks, and I hope you enjoy today's webinar.
Hi, everybody. My name is Parag Medawar. I'm pleased to welcome you to this webinar today. What we're doing today, we've got our webinar series today. We are SASE Pro. Our organization is put together to unlock the leadership potential of Asian American professionals. So a little bit of brief background before we get into the thick of the webinar itself. What we are geared toward is to work against the Asian leadership gap. Asian studies show that Asians are 50% less likely to be promoted to middle management than their Caucasian counterparts, and that creates that Asian leadership gap. Our belief, our understanding based off of our research is that there are 4 common factors leading to this: a lack of political and organizational savvy, cultural deference to authority, ineffective communication and influencing skills, and an aversion to risk-taking. Now, those are common factors. That isn't in everything. Everybody has every one of these things. They are just general common factors for our population in total. So the challenge, though, is that there's a lack of awareness of this Asian leadership gap. Often we think and others think that, hey, model minority myth, we're doing just fine. And the reality is, well, to an extent. And so part of it is just the awareness. Another big part is being able to train those leadership skills with the cultural context that is necessary for the content to land and for the content to be relevant. And so that's a lot of what we at SASE Pro do, is work with companies to be able to deliver that. Another challenge that most organizations have is that Asian development is a low priority from a company resource standpoint. When you look at the DEI initiatives, often other groups, understandably so, get more focus and attention and funding. And so that leaves us with, needing to make do with what we can. And so that's a lot of what SASE Pro does, is we pool our resources together across Asian ERGs from 60 plus companies, to put together programming. Signature programs are our conventions. We just had one about a month ago, our national convention. We'll have a women's leadership conference in April, and you can stay tuned to learn more about that. But some of the year-round programs that we have are this webinar series. It's a way to provide content for all ERGs to participate on a more or less a monthly basis. And it's free, thanks to the generosity of sponsors. And as you saw, Northrop Grumman has been sponsoring a series of 6 right now. We're toward the end right now. And then we've got another company signing up after that. So this webinar series, again, it is free. It's, generally speaking, we'll feature training partners or interviews with executives like today. Every 3 to 4 weeks. They are recorded and it will be posted to YouTube. So all of you should have gotten a pop-up saying that this is being recorded. And you can stay informed by going to our webinar page and or signing up or following us on LinkedIn. So with that, I want to start this webinar and talk a little bit, do a little bit of an introduction. So we have a conversation with Dong Ha, who is the CEO of Northrop Grumman in South Korea. And to lead this conversation, we have brought on Weber Eng. Weber is a longtime SASE volunteer. He led the SASE Houston Pro chapter for a few years and coordinated a pretty phenomenal regional conference down in Houston a few years back. He is coming to us from Dow and down in Louisiana right now. And so we brought Weber back to lead this conversation. So Weber, you want to do a brief intro, and then I'll hand it over to you to do the intro for Dong.
Yep, sure. Thanks, Parag. So hi, everyone. My name is Weber Ong, a production director here in Louisiana for Dow Chemical. So really enough of myself. I think what's most important is to really introduce our guest, speaker, our guest executive here today. As Parag's mentioned, just a little few introduction points about Dong. He's the Chief Executive Officer, right, in Northrop Grumman, South Korea. He's also a veteran. He's just recently, I'd say recently, concluded a 27-year career as a foreign area officer, right, specializing in Korean affairs in the U.S. Army, retiring at the rank of colonel. He's got a lot of good experience, a lot of great stories to tell. I've just briefly talked to him a little bit a week before, and pumped up to be honored to be his host today. So without further ado, Dong, would you mind just sharing us your story and tell us a little bit about yourself as we progress through this conversation?
Yeah. Hey. Thanks, Weber, for the kind introduction. It's always tough to kind of introduce yourself, your own self. Normally, it's easier for others to do it, but I think you start on with the hard question here, so I give it a best shot here. My story is quite interesting. When we first immigrated to America back in 1975, we landed in Clarksville, Tennessee. A few years later, we moved to Lebanon, Tennessee, really to start a pizza place. Because back in 70s, there weren't a lot of opportunity for Asian families, particularly if you were the only Asian family in that town to make a living. And we thought about, should we do a Korean restaurant or not? But figured that everybody liked pizza, so the safe bet was going to the pizza business. So we're Asians. We were the only Asian in Lebanon, Tennessee, pretty much during that time, and we start off on a pizza venture back in 70s. We made the best pizza. I mean, even to today, many people around Lebanon, Tennessee, actually drove there to eat our pizza. And again, running a restaurant is hard, but it really teaches you the value of hard work. And I learned that from the very early on that it pays off. And I'm sure most of you on this call can relate. In Asian culture, we were all taught that there's only a few options out there. Right? You either become a doctor, engineer, or lawyer. Right? There's pretty limited on the scope of the jobs that our parents want to pursue. Military career is even more unusual. But I had a calling to serve in the Army because of what my parents experienced during the Korean War and how the U.S. helped troops South Korea during that period. So I joined the U.S. military, and I even asked to serve in Korea for my very first assignment in the DMZ. That's the line that really separates North and South Korea. And during that time, there was a very, very tense period between two countries. And really to maximize my skills and the qualities that I possess as a language, having a cultural background and having the language skills. After I joined the military, I felt obligated to be an Asian role model in the service. I had to tell myself, I have to succeed so that others can realize it's possible for Asian Americans to have a successful military career. And I'm sure, I have my period, and I'm sure there's a lot more Asian American leaders coming up in the military ranks even today and in the future. After my military career, serving for 27 years, I joined Northrop Grumman for my next chapter. Retiring as colonel in the military, and my final assignment as a foreign area officer in Northeast Asia. I had several options during that time, but I chose Northrop Grumman because of the company values. One of the key values that the company embraces is diversity and inclusion at all levels. Even today, the company is doing a great job in that area, and I'm proud to be part of that corporate committee that represents the Asian community. So I'm very, very passionate about the diversity and inclusiveness. And in fact, I have a strong belief that diversity is our biggest strength and the biggest discriminator. Because when I remember back in '87, there were very few Asian American officers in the Army. And because of my background and the unique blending of Asian and American culture, I was able to succeed as an officer. So as we speak more about it today, I wish to share more about my story of growing up as an Asian American and how it really shaped my career. So I look forward to a conversation with her. I know it's kind of a long introduction, but I want to kind of set the tone for the audience. Yeah.
It's you got one of the most interesting stories I've heard. So just kind of winding back the clock. Growing up in Tennessee. What prompted you to, and you mentioned the calling to serve, how was that experience? What called you upon to serve and join the military at a young age?
Well, that's interesting because the military was really the farthest from my what my vision of what I was wanted to become. Yeah, so like I said earlier, if I remember back, my parents went through the Korean War. They were in their, teenage years, so they remember vividly what happened and how the American troops helped Korean rise again from the debris from the war. And trust me, I got plenty of those war stories, so they were like a walking history of what happened. And also my parents always taught me to be a person who serve for others, serve more than yourself. And there was a couple of incidents actually during that period, if I remember. It's been a while, but I remember back. There was the beginning of my sophomore year. There was, my father was going through a stage 4 stomach cancer. And he was in his final days, and obviously everything else was working out just fine. We had 3 restaurants at that point. We were being a future McDonald's. We had our pizza place in Lebanon, Gallatin, and Murfreesboro. Actually, I was running one in college in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. So everything was going well, but obviously there were some personal issues we were dealing with, and reference back to my earlier comment, how much my parents actually respect military people in service and the people in uniform. Then also, and during that period, I remember thinking, what can I do for my father in his final days? Give him something that, that he, in his final days. Then while that was going on in my mind, I was walking through a campus one day, and I bumped into a student. So I've got to tell you this story about, this is really kind of when you're right at the edge, when somebody sort of kind of tap you to push you over. So this is kind of meeting kind of tapping and pushing me over. But I was sophomore in college, and I bumped into a student as I was walking toward one of my classes, and he asked me where I was from originally. And I told him, I was from South Korea. And then he said, hey, I lost my father during the Korean War. He went to Korean War and never came back. And he doesn't remember what his father looked like, but he is so proud that South Korea is doing so well today. And at that moment, I stood there in the middle of the campus, and something just hit me in the head with the sledgehammer. It just stood there thinking, here's a guy, doesn't even know his father, but he's happy that South Korea is doing so well. At that moment, something really hit me hard, reminding me that I am living an American dream, running small business, attending college, enjoying my freedom. And I'm telling to myself at that moment, I said, what have I done for a country that has given me so much? And here's a stranger, total stranger that just bumped into, who didn't even know where Korea was. His father paid the ultimate sacrifice, protect the country that I was born and raised. So at that moment, very moment, my father's the stories of the Korean War and how much he respected, all that was going through my mind. And at that moment, I felt the calling saying, you know what, this is what I was born to do. My parents knew it from the beginning. The person I just bumped into reminded me. And next thing I know, I was in ROTC department, running shuttle runs and long jumps and doing all kinds of physical activities. And if I remember back now, I think I was taking actual physical training tests to start my journey toward being a commissioned to second lieutenant Army. And that's really where I started my journey with my military career.
No, just kind of following up on, your military experience, so growing up in the 70s and 80s as an Asian American, right? Who was your role model, that shaped your, military career and eventually, of course, as now a Northrop Grumman executive?
Well, as I look back, I would say the role model clearly was my father. It started very young age. He always, he pretty much portrayed some of the key leadership traits that we were taught as I was coming up in the military. He was the leader in our family. He led by example. He did things that for us to emulate. He knew his children. He knew his family, and so he knew how to bring up in a way that what we are today, our siblings, our family, and also he did things that show us that instead of telling us what to do, he actually led by example of what the good leadership looked like. So it started for me very, very early on. I mentioned earlier in my comment, serve. He was serving, not only his family, but he was serving in his community. He was serving in his surrounding. It's everything that he surrounded himself with. He was always serving others, and I really didn't realize growing up in a very young age why he did all those things. But as I got older, I realized that he was those key leadership traits that he was portraying, and we were actually watching and learning. So it kind of started very early on, and it was natural for me as I moved into military, started my leadership training, that all those traits that we were being taught to us, it was already embedded in me as I was coming up.
How would you, you're almost talking about like servant leadership in a sense. I think you're alluding to some of that. With your leadership roles in the military and of course now in the civilian leadership ranks, are there any differences that you've observed, as a CEO, as well as a colonel, right, in the military? Any difference in leadership styles? Any similarities, perhaps?
Well, I think that leadership style in the military and leadership in the corporate world, really, they're not too much different. It really starts with your foundation of as a leader. Then obviously, as in military leadership is more of a centralized planning and decentralized execution. So pretty much you train your people, you educate your people, and have them involved as a part of that planning process. But when you're actually out there executing the mission, you make the decision at the lowest level. And I think also when you look at the corporal as Weber, that that it's not too much difference. So you plan together, you have an end state in mind as you plan things, and you execute the mission as a team, and trusting each other, understanding that the teamwork is a strength and clearly is a discriminator, and diversity is a discriminator. So I think when you put those pieces together, things that you execute in the military leader versus things you execute in the corporate world is really not much difference, I would say. And really, it starts with that solid foundation.
Right. Yeah, and kind of brings the question also, like with your exposure and in the U.S. military, now working in South Korea. I always, I had an assignment in Japan, right? And so a little bit of the Asia Pacific experience. As far as leadership styles, are right, in Western, Eastern, are there any, I would say like Western leadership, right? I always think in terms of like being outspoken, right? The Eastern leadership more, perhaps maybe sometimes a little bit hierarchical, a little bit more traditional, quiet, perhaps, top down. Have you seen any difference, and is there really one style that's better than the other? And is there any advice you have? Because a lot of the folks on the call, right, have like Asian American heritage, Asian heritage, right? And sometimes we get conflicted, right, between the Western and the Eastern styles, right? Any difference and any advice for for the folks on the call?
Oh, okay. Very good question, Weber. Well, I don't really believe one style is better than other. I think it's how we connect with one another. So let me give you a kind of quick story of in my time at the grad school, at the Naval Postgraduate School, where we had some international officer that was attending the school. There was 3 South Korean officers that really never asked questions or really challenged the professor while they were there, and but they were always at the very front of the class, and they had the best grades. So I remember a professor approaching me one day, since I was a U.S. Military officer. So he came by and asked, and said, "Hey, why does Korean officers do not speak up or question anything that I say in the classroom? Do they not like me, or are they not comfortable? Or they get great grades, but they don't really speak up. So I don't know what they're thinking." Well, I told them, I said, well, it's in our Asian culture, Korean culture, that we really you brought up in a way that you really don't question or challenge someone in a position of authority. You assume that they're there because of their potentials. They're right. Therefore, so the professor actually walked away, kind of scratching his head, like, okay, I got that. But again, I think that the point of the story is that we have to recognize that everyone comes from different backgrounds. Even in our SASE community, we're all, come from different background and different family upbringings. and sometimes different cultures, right? We may come from the same region, but we may have a slightly different culture. So respect and understanding is very important. Then obviously, when you're doing business on an international scale, you have to be culturally aware. Major international companies, let's say, for example, Northrop Grumman, our commitment, our differentiator is really the diversity and inclusion. We have a very, very diverse leadership talent in our company. And I'm also part of that corporate diversity and inclusion committee. So our leadership is really committed to diversity and inclusion because they understand that that's a strength and that's a differentiator to our competitors. So I would say it's very important to have a combination of multiple leadership style to adjust to a different situation, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it kind of goes to the, Parag kind of kicked us off with one of the missions for SASE, is to unlock the leadership potential, right, in the Asian American population, and while still staying true to the core values of being I wouldn't say like East meets West sort of thing. Aside from the cultural awareness and embracing diversity, what are the key critical leadership skills do you see is necessary for AAPIs, right, to develop as they aspire and progress through the top levels, right, of their organizations?
Well, yeah, thanks for that question, Weber, because that sort of kind of hit the core of who I am. I was brought up, I was born and raised in South Korea till I was 11. I was brought up in a very conservative Asian family with the 5 siblings. So yeah, it's interesting when you're brought up in that type of environment. Then all of a sudden now we're thrown into this Western type of culture where how do we modify or shift some of our thoughts and leadership skills to adjust to that. And I think back on your question. I think you mentioned the key phase there, Robert. You said that maintain your core values. Mm-hmm. Obviously, being flexible, agile is important as well. But the successful leadership is really all about maximizing your collective strength. You clearly want to have people with different thoughts, different background, different culture coming together to make a team. That way, not everybody thinks the same way or see things the same way. So for interpersonal communication skill development is very important. But a lot of times we know that, but a lot of times we as Asians that was brought up in our culture, sometimes those kind of things take the back seat to our upbringing, our culture. And I'm sure many of you hearing on this call can relate to what I'm saying. But again, I think in general, when you look at the leadership potential, leadership style going forward, I think you have to keep in mind that leadership development is not a one-day thing or 1 month or even a year. It's having a mindset and a commitment for long game. It's a journey. So it's a compounded effect of learning over time that will take you far in your leadership journey and really ultimately unlocking your true potentials. As I deal with the many people here in our office and other office that we deal with, you can clearly see people's, as they continue to develop that leadership, you can clearly see their potential unlocking. It's sort of like it's a long game, right? So it's okay to fail. I never put people down because they fail. You know, I always said that's a great initiative, right? It's okay to fail. Let's work on your judgment, but it's great initiative, right? I want people to take initiative. And again, it's not really important how many times we fail or we fall. It's how many times you learn from that and you get back up and you get better. And so I think it's really critical. Those kind of leadership development skills is critical to really for successful long run in your career.
Yeah, it's the resiliency, right, and perseverance. So somebody wise actually mentioned this to me before. It's like if you never tried, you will never fail, right? So you don't try, you won't fail.
Exactly.
So it's the
exactly.
You have to have the initiative to try. I'm going to pick one of the questions actually from the chat. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. You can finish them.
Yeah. Trust me, I had many failures in my life too. So you learn from it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll pick one question from the audience actually, to kind of keep them all engaged as well. Here's one question that came up.
Great.
What advice would you give to those who would like to work in another country, and especially for those who want to be in a leadership role?
Well, obviously, when you're considering picking up things and going overseas, it's not an easy decision. You're picking up your family, you're canceling all your bills and all that, and you literally going to a completely different place and different culture. So I think I would say that there's make sure that everybody is different, and if that's your passion to serve overseas, I would say that there's many factors to consider, and I would say sit down with your family and go through all those factors to ensure that everybody's on board with it. Other than just the one of you, because the whole family have to make changes to life, to their life, daily life. And I think also when you look at overseas assignments, have open-minded, because you got to be willing to, for sure, you're going to run into new things, and also the things that you're used to or things you expect, like the country that you live in, and you go to a different country. There's a lot of unexpected things that pops up, and I have seen cases where when people come to overseas assignments not prepared to face those issues, and they are just miserable during that time. They're counting days where they want to get back to their norm, and their family is miserable. Then on the other side of it, I have seen people that is prepared well, the open-minded, and looking for new challenges, new environment, just excel in their time overseas. They go out on a daily basis, meet new people, learn the culture, learn the language, try out new food. That's something that they never had before, and even today, some of those people, they go back and they still when we still talk about those days, how wonderful those days. I would say be prepared. And so also that you have to do what's best for you and your family as far as your career and so forth. So calculate all that aspect. And I would say most importantly is to talk to somebody who has done it before, who's actually in that country, going through that, and learn from that before you come over. I think that'll be advice. And again, also as far as career-wise, there's lots of opportunities here. If I can talk about South Korea. There's a huge opportunity here in South Korea for career enhancement as well. Having that international experience will give you a different perspective when you go back to the U.S. And a lot of time, for example, if you're an engineer that had overseas assignment, a lot of times we run into a case where we design and we make things in U.S. really catering toward U.S. military, because you really don't have the exposure of what happens in international. But if you're an engineer, and we currently have one here in South Korea, if you're an engineer, has that international experience or global experience, actually go back, he'd be the one to say, wait a minute, before we design and before we make this thing, maybe we should consider some of the options that maybe our international customer can purchase and buy and use. Or if we design it this way, maybe U.S. customer use it and we do a slightest modification, then we can have it for international customers sale. So it gives you that idea, the out-of-box thinking, to really look at things in the global level versus just the U.S. view. So I would say overall, it's an opportunity. If you get a chance to do it, I highly suggest that you take a look at it and look at all the options and do it, because it's experience that you can't buy.
So having said that, with the international assignments, how does one go about, right? How does one start, right, to get themselves a international assignment? What advice do you have for the folks on the call?
Well, I would say do your job and do it well. Job that you're in now. Start planning early and start obviously. Do a search, particularly the overseas type of assignment and obviously you have conversation with the HR, because a lot of times HR has a pulse on what's all out there. To talk to your manager and make sure that you get your manager support on your career enhancement or career progression. And so do homework early on, and particularly I have a lot of people that actually contact me and say, hey, Dong, I'm considering this. Would you have a time to come up on the net and talk to me for an hour to kind of, go through some of the advantages and disadvantages? Well, that is actually one of my pleasure working here in South Korea, as I get those emails. So, we get on the phone for about an hour and we talk through things to see, what they're looking for in career-wise, the personal, we have some Korean American that wants to come back, and their wives want to come back. They want to raise their kids here for at least 2-3 years and get them exposed to the Korean culture, their heritage. So we go through a lot of that conversation, and also, it should be good for their career as well. It should not be career, should not be a decision that's going to take them back. So we kind of lay all that out, and then I give advice on when is a good time, given a lot of the business opportunity we have here in Korea. What might be a good time for them to position, and what other things they should be doing prior to that to get ready. So I would say if anybody here on the call thinking about that, great. I think I highly recommend it. But again, kind of get ready early and prepare things, and like I say, the best resource you have is these connections you have in the countries, that the people that's already out there. So definitely utilize them. If you got any question, you don't have to be a Northrop Grumman employee. Anybody on this call that question about coming to Korea or visiting Korea, my service is available.
Sounds like you're going to have 109 participants or people calling you pretty soon. Everyone's been.
I am used to being multitasked. We can do that.
I'm actually going to pick one of these Northrop Grumman questions as well. So Nikki's asking the question about what additional areas of support do you think Northrop Grumman could add to bring greater impact and value in support of our multicultural company culture?
So can you repeat that question again?
Yeah, sure.
You got cut off it then.
Yep, no problem. What additional areas of support do you think Northrop Grumman could add to bring greater impact and value to the company culture, to Northrop Grumman's company culture? What additional areas of support do you think can be added?
Okay, wow, I like that question because that actually hits the heart of what I've been involved with our company right now is that, our leadership is very, very active and very involved in what each employee from Northrop Grumman is thinking. What are our new employees are going through as they enter the workforce? What are some of our mid-level manager? What are some of our engineers going through as are progressing in the as a part of in the mid-level manager? What are some of our the people of color? What are some of the issues they're going through as they're progressing in their careers? So we have this annual survey that we request that all employees to take, and normally it's pretty high percentage response. I think this year was somewhere around close to 90%.
Wow. Believe
it or not, if you're a Northrop Grumman employee out there, your leadership reads your survey. Things that you put down on the survey, they will actually read it. We all actually get together and look at the survey that's been submitted. And based on what you say, our leadership actually prioritizes what their priority is for coming year. So I'll just give you one of the examples is that there was a survey period where Asian Americans, the Asian community, felt that I think, Parag, you mentioned it earlier on your introduction, that the Asians were less likely to get promoted compared to their peers in the ranks, into the management ranks. So based on some of those comments and some of those surveys, our CEO, Kathy Warden, actually prioritized that coming year to really focus in on Asian community, really taking what they said on their survey, and she actually implemented a plan to reach out and address some of those concerns that our Asian community had concerning their career. Some of the survey questions were, why don't we see more Asian executives in our company? Why don't we see more Asian, directors, vice presidents, the engineers at the senior level? And so those were, the things that because of what you said, you changed the dynamic and the priority of our company. So what you say really cares, and our leadership, personally, she doesn't delegate. She actually lead it for us to follow her, and that's a very, very unique with the company of almost 100,000 people.
Wow.
So I think the part of that is, again, I mentioned earlier, right? Be a leader, lead by example, and so your voice is important, and we hear you, and we will act on it. So the advice is take advantage of that opportunity and address the things that you would like to see in your area or in the broader sense, the company, to focus and make changes. Hopefully that answers the question I was asked.
And 90 minutes, 90% does sound like a really good participation rate. And as we were looking, I was just kind of checking on our similar metrics or surveys, right? The voice surveys that we have here at DAC as well. We're not at 90% for sure. We're definitely a couple of less than that. So that's something I think you all should be really proud of. And so switching gears a little bit, and this one might be going into maybe more geopolitical affairs, right? Specifically, with the China relation. Can you give us some impact that you see perhaps impacting maybe South Korea's economy, and how would U.S. companies, right, they're looking to enter and grow in South Korea, what do they, is there anything to worry about, right, with this relationship?
Yes, Weber, I was hoping that you asked something about a geopolitical question, because that really is my comfort zone. it's my background. This is the kind of things I did in the military, and and also obviously doing some here in Northrop Grumman. But well, I think obviously this is a very, very broad. It's a question that our most prestige leaders who've been doing China, U.S. Northeast type of working on Northeast type of issues always has struggled with. But let me take a shot. I think there's forever changing geopolitical dynamic between countries here in Northeast Asia. Long known history. I know for South Korea, it's known history. It's about 5,000 years of known history, but I'm sure China has a lot longer known history. So I'm sure things happened before 5,000, but just that's one that's been truly documented. For South Korea and China is the largest #1 trading partner, while the U.S. is the security guarantor here in the region, particularly in South Korea. With the North Korea threat literally just a couple of miles north. Due to this very unique geopolitical dynamic, South Korea has been playing a very, very delicate balance between two powers, two superpowers here in the region. South Korean economy is really in good shape. I think last data showed that they were still hovering around the top 10 globally. For the size of I think the land size is about the size of Tennessee, or even smaller. Their economy is really doing well. Talent base here is more concentrated in one area compared to U.S. Like in U.S., you have New York, LA, it's very spread out. Here you have Seoul. That's the one city. That's 25 million people in a 25-mile radius. And that is your 50% of the country population. It's all consolidated in one city. Obviously with that, there's an economy of scale advantage to South Korea in certain area. And that's why you're probably seeing Samsung, Hyundai, LG's the world, they're all coming out of Seoul because everything is concentrated in this one city. So to grow in South Korea, again, I come back to the things that I mentioned earlier is you gotta understand the culture here. How people do business here. And what are the things that's important to Korean people? And I gotta give you just one example. we had a visitor, and I won't say if it was Northrop Grumman, if it was government, it was a visitor having a visit with the Korean official, senior official. So a lot of times, Koreans really don't get right to the business. It's more of a iceberg. They want to get to know you before you go into any type of business type of discussion. So one of the questions the Korean official asked was, have you had a chance to eat Korean food? Kimchi. As many of you know here, kimchi is a national pride here for Korean people. And it's really good if you eat it at the right time, when the form is fermented right. So after all the training we gave him to say the right thing, he says, yeah, I had some kimchi, but it was a little spicy for me. That comment that he gave just literally ended that meeting. But Korean, we knew that was in there, but Korean official was very polite and finished the meeting. Then his comment, I think it was the government, when I was in the government, his comment to me was, I don't want to see that guy again.
Wow.
Because now you just insulted their national pride, the kimchi, the food kimchi. Wow. And so I don't know if everybody here on the call know what kimchi is. It's a fermented cabbage with the spices. So the thing about, they take such a pride in their country, particularly their food and the kimchi, and you just now say it's a little too spicy for me. And I think, again, culturally, it offended the person that he was talking to. So I would say, understand the culture, understand what's important to the people of South Korea, and in order to do business, and also embrace the differences. Don't compare, hey, when I was in US, we did it this way. Why did they do it different? Well, because it's a different country and different people and different culture. So always have that open mindset. And when it's different doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's a different, And if you can accept that and understand that, I think that's really important ingredient for success.
A deal that was spoiled because of kimchi. I like that story. Yeah, but to your point though, it's and sometimes I do catch myself having to consciously not compare the previous organization with the current organization, right? Sometimes we do go back to, back when I was working here, we did so well over here, and recognizing that comparing from before sometimes is also not a good message to send. Kind of what demoralizes the new organization you're trying to lead as well. But yeah, I'll remember that kimchi story for sure. So I'm trying to keep just to be aware of time. I know we got 6 minutes remaining. Trying to figure out what the best way is to close this. Maybe for two more questions, really, right? And the first one is really more in terms of more soft, more from a with the travel restrictions hopefully gradually opening up. You've been in Korea for a while now. Where do you recommend that people visit for those that haven't been to Korea, South Korea?
Well, I mean, I clearly recommend anybody visiting this region consider South Korea as one of the places to visit. In my military career, 27 years, 15 years I spent in Korea. So I am very familiar with Korea in many ways. South Korea is a really great place to explore for everyone, regardless of what your hobby is or type of food you like. I mean, you come to Korea, you'll be amazed at the things that they have here. The public transportation, for example, is the best in the world and the safest in the world. You can literally take a subway at 2, 3 a.m. in the morning. And my daughter, normally, stays out late. And, by the way, if she's out there listening, Sarah from Woodland Hill, love you, Sarah. Hopefully you're listening. I want to get that in. But she can actually go out 2, 3 a.m. and take subway, public transportation, and I can go to bed at night without worrying about it. It's the safest place, having almost 25 million people in Seoul. And also Seoul really has, particularly let me focus on Seoul a little bit because that's what everybody's sort of used to, the capital. It's a unique mix of where the tradition and the modern will coexist together. So at one place you'll see a very high-rise skyscrapers. Then you have literally right surrounding that is the ancient royal palaces and temples, a tradition that lasts, they've been here for hundreds and thousands of years. Then when you travel literally a couple of hours away from Seoul, the Korea here is surrounded by the ocean, right? The east and the west and the southern part of the South Korea is pretty much surrounded by ocean. And about 80% of the South Korea terrain is a mountainous terrain. So if you're looking at hiking, they have a beautiful place called Mount Sadak Mountain. Beautiful, particularly if you go in the fall. The beautiful the hiking places there. The coastline, East Coast particularly, if you like seafood, if you like the fishing, that's a great place to go visit. And again, because of the size of the company, it's few hours here and there, and then you hit all those places. And also fantastic food, cuisine. It's international here. You can get Korean food. You can literally get any type of food globally here.
Yeah.
and shopping particularly. If you like shopping, that's you can. So I would say, and also actually you can also visit DMZ while you're here, and then you can step into the North Korea. There's a line that kind of goes across the DMZ, and you can actually step over to the North Korea and tell your family and friends that you were actually in North Korea, and then you made it back in one piece. So then sometimes you run into like the K-pop stars here, right? BTS or Blackpink, and I ran into a Blackpink here at the building that we work in, Northrop Grumman office. So again, all the members listening in, SAS's member on this call, you have a special access to Dong Ha here in Korea. So if you're ever coming through, not calling in, if you're ever coming through Korea headed this way, drop me a note and I can give you advice on where to visit.
Awesome. That's awesome. Because we got one more minute, but I do want to ask if there's any closing thoughts or advice that you have for our webinar participants today.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity there. So thank you for your time today. And thank you for the opportunity to allow to share some of my story today. So in closing, I would like to say open-minded to a new opportunity in your life. As you're coming up in your careers, you can go far as you want or high as you want to truly unlock your potential. Don't limit yourself, and don't tell yourself that because you're Asian American, it's not possible. It is possible for Asian American or whatever the background you're from to have a key leadership position in the military or in the corporate world. I believe I have demonstrated it. There's the people before me have also demonstrated, and I believe now all of you who are future leaders on this call, it's now your time to write your own story. So I hope I have contributed to shaping some of that pathway for other Asian Americans to follow. So again, I want to thank everyone for listening, and look forward to hopefully meeting some of you face to face in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dong. I know it's probably like just 6 a.m. for you, so you probably had to get up at 4 a.m. just to attend this call. So very much appreciative. Thank you again. Parag, back to you.
Well, thank you, Weber.
Wonderful. Thank you both, Dong and Weber. Really appreciate it. I believe my screen is showing up now. Real quick before we close, a quick webinar. Our webinar page is saseconnect.org/webinar. Jessica, could you go ahead and launch the poll real quick? We've got 2 questions on the feedback survey. Select the first one and then scroll down and select the second one. It is 2 very simple questions. How would you rate the webinar, and how likely is it that you would recommend this webinar to a friend? Just those 2 real quick. If you could populate those, that'd be wonderful. While I've got your attention and doing that as well, our next free webinar is January 9th with Payal Berry. Payal was one of our trainers at our conference, at our national conference a month ago, and had some fantastic perspective to share regarding using empathy as a leadership strength. This webinar is using emotional intelligence effectively for your career. And yeah, again, it's free to anyone and everyone. We'll be circulating this through the ERGs within the coming weeks, but feel free to go to saseconnect.org/webinar and you can register now. For more information, our website, our LinkedIn page, we post all of this stuff on LinkedIn if you are active on LinkedIn, also our Facebook page. For general inquiries, you can either send to, or for inquiries, you can send to either ideas or pro@saseconnect.org and reach out to us. And yeah, with that, thank you very much for your time. Hope you all have a wonderful holiday season here in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I am. We welcomed is a loose term, but we welcomed our first snow. My wife's not thrilled about that, but hey, hopefully for the rest of you, have a wonderful season and we see you in January. Okay, thanks everyone.